All right, class.
Perfect.
Hi, what was that? Okay, we'll begin today's lesson with a few announcements. The first announcement is the assignments that are due this week, the 17th, which is today. You have quiz 5 and the current event that we've already discussed. Next week's assignments are due on Tuesday, not Wednesday, because the college is officially closed from Wednesday through the week. So it is due Tuesday. I will go over that assignment with you shortly. Also, this is our last lecture. The live online courses give the class time, I'll quote unquote, for tests and other things. You don't have to do it in the restricted class time, but you are given time, contact hours, to complete your final exam and your quiz and things along those lines. So this is our last official class meeting. Next week, there will be no meetings. We have Thanksgiving. The college will be closed, obviously, on that Wednesday. And on that Monday, you're given leave to work on the final exam review and the work that is due on Tuesday. When we return the last week of the semester, on the 29th, we will have our end of the year review. The end of the year review will include the final exam and the final quiz, which we wrap up the marine resources today. So we have the last lecture, and then November 29th is our last meeting. It is the review for the final exam and the final quiz. Are any questions based on the schedule or anything like that? All right.
I'm sorry, can you one more time? What date last lessons?
Today, the 17th is the last lecture. On November 29th, when we return from Thanksgiving break, next week we have no class. We will have the review for the final exam and the last quiz.
Mm-hmm.
Much like the midterm, when we reviewed for the last unit quiz around the midterm and then the midterm exam, we'll have the same session where we'll ask questions and kind of go through everything together.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. So it's bittersweet. It's been a great semester and you guys have been very interactive and enjoyable. But the holiday season's upon us and then we move on to another semester. Next week's work, again, we are looking at a Tuesday deadline, not a normal Wednesday deadline. So please make note of that. You have 2 assignments. The first assignment is called Civic Engagement, Writing Letters to Elected Officials. Part of the college's overall goals is citizenship. So we're clicking that box as well as looking at oceanography. Another goal is preparing students for real life, finding jobs, things like that, and for having the skills of how to write a formal letter is very important for an adult. So we will be using oceanography to teach greater life skills in the civic engagement portion. So I'll move down to a sample letter. This is just the simple block style. I'm by no means an English teacher. So there's many ways to write a letter. This is the one that I use because it's easy it's formal. So you never get caught out there with a subpar letter, and it will help me get what I expect across, because I kind of wrote the expectations in letter form. So what I have here will go right here, you know, your full name. Now I changed the margin to have it be on this, on the right margin. And then you, next line, address, and then the date that you were writing it. Then you space and left margin, and then the honorable, whatever official you choose there. Now, if you're writing to a boss, you might put the boss's name and title. If you're writing to a company in a cover letter, you would put the company's name there. However you do that, you would put a formal, respectful name, and then their title underneath it, and then the address. You already have the date, so you don't have to repeat that. And then, dear, whatever name you have done, and always be formal with that, a Mr., Ms., Doctor, however you would address that person, you put there, and then you use a colon. Then you skip another space, and then your first paragraph. In a letter, you are allowed not to indent paragraphs. That's called block style. I did not indent here. You also may indent 5 spaces. And then you type your opening statement. You want to include that you're a constituent of this because you're writing an elected official. If you're writing a job, you would say you're very interested in this field pertaining to the job that you're going for. You hold a degree in that. It's just something to introduce yourself a little bit. And then you need to identify the reason that you're writing the letter and what you hope to gain from an elected official. You may hope to either sway their opinion or reinforce their opinion if they believe, if they have a similar opinion to you. If you're going for a job, obviously you hope to start a career or continue a career. Of course, I'm adding more than what I expect and putting in jobs and things like that, just so you can use that in future life. Now we're going with an elected official. It's a civic engagement exercise. Okay. Now remember, you have a specific issue, so don't stray too far from that issue. If you're going for a job, you're going for a specific career move or a specific job, so don't stray too far from that. It's a focused, you're never going to write more than 1 page, because generally speaking, if a cover letter is more than 1 page, it gets thrown into the, right into the dumpster. People don't want to read more than 1 page. Paragraph 2, possibly 3, discuss the issue in this case, how it relates to you and your community. You know, you should have your facts straight, and you may have to do research. You might include a personal story if you're writing about pollution, how it affected you in a negative way, or if you're writing to sway a vote for groundwater, whatever topics you've chose, you might want to include something personal. Now that can be 1 or 2 paragraphs. Generally in the job search, it's just 1, because you don't want to bore a future employer. Your vita and all that will have all of your you know, shiny skills, so to speak. And then lastly, just reiterate what you're asking. A thank you, skip several lines, 2 or 3, and then type your name, and then you sign it. I chose script here to show a signature. When you turn it into me, you may type your name in script and then block it down below. Again, if you have other styles of writing business letters, you may use them, because I'm not an English teacher. I just taught you the simplest one possible. It's also neat. It's always worked for me. I've never had a problem with it. Also, if you use references, do not put them in the letter. Put them on a blank page behind the letter. What you're sending me as a letter is something that you would put in an envelope and send, and I doubt you're going to send your references to an elected official. But I do want to see your references, so include them in a separate page. All right, so like I mentioned, it's the college goals. Civics is one of the college's goals. Effective communication is not only a college goal, but it's a life skill that you can always fall back on. And then a well-written personal letter is a very effective way to communicate. And it generally is the most effective to communicate with elected officials. So what you'll need to do is select a topic that relates to this class, not the class we learned today, but our class overall. We did talk about acidification of the oceans and the change in climate. We talked about acid rain. We've talked about many different aspects, and choose any of the aspects that you want. We live in a coastal community that relies on tourism. So that's an added bonus. And we're faced with many questions like drilling, how to dispose of our solid waste. Do we deep well inject it? Do we dump it into the ocean, straight pipe it? How do we handle our wastewater? Eutrophication, how do we handle eutrophication? You know, you're not allowed to buy fertilizer. They can't sell it in stores during a certain time period because of the eutrophication. And our, landscapers and stuff can't use it, but some stores sell it and just bite it and take the fine. So just choose a topic that relates to this class. Produce a formal business letter. The last discussion forum is also due next Tuesday. Rose George, Inside the Secret Shipping Industry. I found it a fascinating TED Talk. She's not an exciting speaker by any stretch, but the points that she brought up, talking about the different companies, how much is actually shipped, how it affects the environment, even talked about piracy, even talked about the psychology of people affected by who work on these ships. It was very, very interesting, although she didn't have a lot of bells and whistles with her chat. But because there's so much involved and our topic is human interactions with the ocean, it's a very on point TED Talk. And I found it interesting. You just have to listen. Those are the two assignments that are due on next Tuesday, the 23rd.
Excuse me, do you have an example of a letter that you've maybe written to a constituent that we could look at?
I do not know.
All right.
Plus, I don't want to stifle your creative process by telling you, showing you what I've done. So then I wind up with 31 out of 32 copies with just the words changed.
Gotcha.
It's just at the college level, this is a 2000 level course. So it's a sophomore in college course. And I mean, I have a parrot. I like parrots, but I don't want you guys to be parrots, if you know what I mean. I'm not going to be hypercritical on your topic that you choose, but I want you to have your creative input and give it your flair, not mine. All right, our big last lecture. I'm sure that most of you recognize this picture. I know me, when I was in high school, little useless reminiscing, of course. Senior year, got a little senioritis, decided to skip school with a few friends. And fate called in, pretended I was one of my parents in a fake voice, got away with it, but that's a whole nother story. And we sat around all day as, dime store philosophers, I guess, senior boys. What do you want to do with the rest of your life type stuff? This whole high school and living with your parents is coming to an end. And we decided that we were going to be crab fishermen in Alaska. That was the big decision that we made. We all really were quite outdoorsy, like to camp and fish and hike and never really spent 10 minutes inside. And none of us were really athletic. We weren't like playing sports outside. We were doing nature type stuff. And we heard that you could make buku bucks in a very short period of time, Alaskan crab fishing. So that's it. We're going to graduate high school, move to Alaska. And my parents said, oh, hell no, you're not. You're going to graduate high school and go to college. And I said, okay, Mom and Dad. And I graduated high school and went to college. Back then, we had cable, so we didn't have cable my whole life. Most of my life we didn't, but we had cable by then, so I'm not old like dinosaurs. I'm more ice age, not Mesozoic. But I watched this TV show now. I dodged a bullet. I'd have died on one of those things. One, I hate the cold, and it's cold. And two, I'm not that strong. I mean, now I'm old, so I'm certainly not that strong. But even when I was young, those things are huge. And then, so it was, I got lucky and went intellectual. But it was a good dream. And this picture always makes me giggle and tell that story, which is, but look at the size of those crabs. So let's apply a little oceanography to this. Why do those crabs get so big? Because cold water is nutrient rich. We learned that nutrients and gases dissolve better in cold water. So the Bering Sea, which incidentally is very rough because of cold water currents and many fronts blowing through, has huge organisms that live there and great biodiversity. So we are using the natural resources here, food, obviously, because we're talking about resources. We can relate it to a little physical and chemical oceanography as well. The law of the sea, me hearties, international agreement that we can't really enforce. I remember watching a show, the Sea Shepherds were in some whale wars, and they had that on for a few years on one of the Discovery channels or something. And because some countries are still whaling and some are whaling and calling it research, but they're whaling, and whaling's been agreed against by international agreement. But there's no way to really reinforce it outside of your exclusive economic zone. The exclusive economic zone is off your coast. So the United States has 1.3 million square kilometers, 12 miles off coast. That's exclusive economic zone. You cannot go into that and harvest any of the materials without paying that country. 2,000 is minerals. The laws are 12 miles. That's why when you go on those gambling boats, which people often do, those gambling boats, they go 12 miles offshore, and then you're out of our waters. Then the laws don't necessarily apply. And then you come back and you're back in our waters. And we own all of the minerals, and every country owns all of the minerals 200 nautical miles from shore. You got to empty your ballast 200 nautical miles from shore. The thing about a ship's ballast, they take in water to make the ship more dense. They sit lower in the sea, and you use less fuel because you're fighting waves less, fighting wind less as you ship around the world. Now, shipping is how we do most of our business still. So the ocean transportation, that's one of the resources. That's a non-extractive resource. So you don't take anything, but you still use it. So you pump in water, say in China, and you get all the plankton and larvae, especially larvae, because they grow into big things. And then you ride your ship across the sea with a full ballast. And then when you come close to the United States water, within 200 miles, you're supposed to empty the ballast and travel the last 200 miles sitting up high, because all those larvae will die 200 miles from shore. They wouldn't reach in and foul up coastal ecosystems. Unfortunately, many unscrupulous captains don't empty their ballast. They come in at night because you save fuel and cut a lot of costs. So you're emptying your ballast closer to shore, and things like the zebra mussel and the Asian mussel, and just many exotic species get released in areas where they don't belong. So that's a violation of these exclusive economic zones and then the law of the sea. But it happens a lot. Difficult to enforce. Now, remember the Gulf Horizon spill we discussed last week. Was that last week? No, it was this week on Monday. We allowed British Petroleum, which is not an American company, to harvest that oil. It was in our exclusive economic zone, but we sold the mineral rights. So you can sell the mineral rights in that area, but another country can't come and take it under international agreement. There's two types of resources that we look at, the renewable and the non-renewable. Renewable resources are replaced within an individual's lifetime. That's like the rule of thumb. They replenish themselves. They're not necessarily sustainable. Sustainability is it stays renewable. You can turn a renewable resource into a non-renewable resource by abuse or over extraction, overfishing, or by a pollution, destroying an ecosystem. Many ways to do that. Very difficult to change back though. We did see it change back when we talked about how those dead zones recovered when fertilizer was not being used. We've spent decades turning Tampa Bay back into a valuable resource. So it is possible, but it's pricey and time consuming. Some of the physical resources that we extract from the sea, you know, the mineral deposits, mining the ocean, petroleum, natural gas, we've touched upon that. Fresh water, rare, but we do, like TECO uses, has a water reclamation project. They use saline water in their cooling towers and then use the steam not only to make electricity, but to distill it. It's very expensive and very energy inefficient to desalinize water. The principal mined resources are salt. Now, we don't mine salt from the ocean itself. We mine it from deposits made near the ocean, salt deposits, potassium, magnesium. Here's a biggie, gravel and sand, building materials, limestone and gypsum. That's Florida. We mine that manganese, phosphorites, metals, and placer deposits. A placer deposit is something that eroded from land into the ocean. Here's gypsum cliffs in Nova Scotia. These are being mined for gypsum. Gypsum is a mineral that we use in plaster and sheetrock. We do have gypsum mines here in Florida. Before class started, and I thank the gentleman for asking me a question regarding karst topography and then acid and how we get sinkholes and things. Gypsum is another dissolvable rock associated with karst topography. And we do have gypsum deposits in Florida, and we mine it as well. So these are mineral resources. Gypsum's a mineral, and we use it extensively in construction. I didn't mention the placer deposits, and we are mining the ocean for these tin, titanium, other metals, even diamonds have been uncovered by erosion in coastal areas. Now the marine energy resources, and we've already gone through oil extensively, but we'll visit that. These are our oil reserves. You can see extensive oil reserves here. Oil, the fossil fuel, comes from plankton. Coal comes from land plants. So our coal deposits, the great coal areas of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, that big tract of coal, those are ancient swamps that have been covered, and the plants were lithified, turned to rock, turning them into coal. A similar process in these shallow seas, this would have been a shallow area, a shallow sea. Over time, the organisms collect, and if they're covered with sediments, their organic oils separate out, and you have natural gas, oil, water, salt. That's the layers. Our uses of petroleum. Well, first, petroleum, carbon, hydrogen, or organic chemistry, fun class. I recommend it to all. Study of carbon chains, carbon rings, that's organic. Oil's organic, it's fossil fuel. Carbon and hydrogen are requirements to be organic, so it's mostly organic, and then you have these traces. Organic compounds don't melt, they burn, combustion, giving off carbon dioxide from the carbon, and that's how we get energy, heat, combustion. So we don't really burn inorganic. Inorganic don't combust. They melt or have other uses. Organics is what we burn. And fuel, oil is a organic substance. We do distill our oil, and we get alkanes, short chain alkanes. An alkane is a group of organic molecules like methane, ethane, propane, octane. They all end in that ane, and we use that. That's the natural gas. We also extract diesel fuel and heating oils, gasoline, jet fuels, kerosene, plastics and polyester and nylons. All these synthetics all are oil-based because we have hydrocarbons. That's what they are. They're hydrocarbons. Lubricants, waxes, asphalt, many uses for petroleum products, not just gas. Like I said, it forms in these shallow seas, and gas, oil, and then you got your salt, maybe some slurry of water underneath it. These shallow seas, the plankton would build up, and then when they're covered by sedimentation, plate tectonics, or evaporation, trapping all of them, and then deposition on top, over time, the oils separate out. So you would have, and it used to be they drill, and the natural gas would be released because it was it was in the way. Now we trap it and sell it and use it. It's a lot cleaner than the oil. And then you pump out the oil and then you're gone. Now people come and then they go to those old oil wells and they frack. They fill it with fluid, hot fluid, and repump it out to pull out more oil because, you know, back not even 15 years ago, we did not have that technology. As technology increases, we can revisit and extract even more. Fracking then extracts even more. Only about a quarter of our natural gas, quarter of our oil comes offshore drilling. It's a lot harder than on land drilling, but the deposits are extensive. So the reserves offshore are not tapped as much. So offshore drilling will continue long into the future. We did talk about the crude oils and how they start off light and volatile and the gases escape and then they're non-sticky. And then the weathering occurs. Remember weathering, how it does, the dissolved goes away, the heat, the sun, so they become heavier and very sticky. Then they solidify into tar and sink. So crude oil starts off, it's called sweet, but it's light, sweet, it's full of all of its constituents. And as it breaks down, it eventually sinks. Now, crude oil is different from refined because refined oil, they add a whole bunch of chemicals to help it separate. So refined oil is more dangerous, but then after it separates, the typical gallon, and you've heard of barrels are a barrel of oil is 42 gallons. So when we use 100 barrels, we use 42 times 100 gallons, and 3% of it's asphalt. Half of it, just under half, is gasoline for cars and motors. You can see here where the different constituents go. Now, in addition, trapped under our ice caps and trapped in deep areas, we do have methane hydrates and other hydrates, which would be under pressure, under cool temperatures, those natural gases take on a solid form. Now, wind and solar energy is also used in the ocean. You can see here is an oceanic wind farm. Very limited, but still used are tidal turbines. You have to have extreme tides for this, not a baby tide, but really a tidal bore areas. So it works great in passes in an area where there's a forced tide, and you spin your turbines and create your electricity that way. Now, energy cannot be created or destroyed, it only changes forms. That's one of the laws of mechanical physics. So you have to have energy to make energy. The traditional gas or the electric plant, you burn something, oil or whatever, and that creates steam, and you use that steam to turn a turbine. That energy of motion, kinetic energy, a turbine is magnets around a coiled wire. This coiled wire has a lot of electrons because metals have a sea of electrons, and that forces electrons to move, and forced motion of electrons is electricity. So you create electricity that way. Now, you have to spin a turbine for electricity to be produced. These rotors are turbines, they're spinning, electricity is produced. These rotors under the tides are spinning, electricity is produced. Another energy of motion are these wave energy, they collect wave energy, not without impact though. Every single one of these has impact, different impacts. There's no such thing as a clean getaway when it comes to energy. These rotors here wreak havoc on coastal ecosystems, birds especially. These tidal rotors damage marine life, and also, you can't really navigate a boat or anything around all these tidal rotor things. So, it's wasted space. Here, again, you can't navigate through the wave energy collectors. This one here, where you pump hot water down and then let the hot water rise, spinning your turbine, you're using energy and it's not very efficient. So you don't make a clean getaway when it comes to energy. It's unfortunate. Now, non-extractive resources include transportation, which is our TED Talk, recreation, and waste disposal. Now, we're going to discuss that, but we already discussed the waste disposal last class, but you're not taking anything out of the water. Here, look at this beach. That is a typical Asian beach. Here in the United States, we have it good. The entire east coast of the United States has a barrier island system, and we have so much beach. So our beaches aren't utilized by half a continent, because we have thousands of miles of beach when you add it all up around our coasts. But a place like Europe, an entire continent, only has the Mediterranean and a little bit in the Atlantic, but again, that's a cold current, so you don't have the beach, it's a rocky coast. You have a little down the French Riviera, but that's more mad. A place like Asia that has billions of people, you only have, and with restricted in like China and things, you don't have many beaches where people can show up. So this is a typical day at a beach in an area that's overpopulated. So it does put a lot of pressure on the marine life. Now, freshwater is a resource that we have a very difficult time getting from the ocean because it's so expensive to desalinate or not efficient. Our ocean covers 2/3 of our Earth, and 97% of our water is salt water, and really it's not potable. The biological resources that we get from the ocean are generally harvesting. Now, we did talk about kelp in the ecology section, but really fish and crustaceans and mollusks are the most valuable of the biological resources. You can see here, China consumes more than half of the resources as far as oceanic goes, the food. Now, aquaculture is interesting. And again, you don't get away clean. Aquaculture, especially like shrimp farms and fish farms, you have to level a coastal ecosystem to bring water in and raise things. Also, you have a lot of waste to dispose of. So obviously, line caught, less environmental, if I could speak today, less environmental impact with your line caught or your sustainably produced seafoods. But when you're looking at a country that has several billion people, that's not really what works. So most of the seafood that humans consume is unsustainable or farmed in an unsustainable fashion. It's just a numbers game. Now, aquaculture is farming it. This is one that you get less output, but it's the most environmentally friendly. It's multi-trophic aquaculture, where you run entire ecosystems in your farms. United States has a great fisheries program. We raise fish, not just for aquaculture, but the different states raise sport fish and stock areas for recreation as well. Many of them are multi-trophic now. I say this because the best fish to get rid of the waste products of all the other fish are tilapia. Tilapia eat and help clean the water, so they handle the waste products. They're like the pigs of the fish farm, if you will, because pigs handle the waste products in farming a lot of times. So these tilapia, and then the added benefit is they have mild white flesh, which means they're sold at market. So basically, you're eating your garbage disposals when you get the tilapia farm raised. If you ever go ponds, golf courses, everywhere, these tilapia, they make these huge funnel-shaped nests almost, and they just sit in there during the time, and they're all over. They're mouth brooders too, if you remember that Boyd Hill video. But tilapia are easy to care for, hardy, and they get rid of your waste problem. Now, mariculture is the least efficient, best for the environment. That is just sectioning off an area and letting Mother Nature do her work. So here's a shrimp farm in Southeast Asia. Like I said, huge environmental impact, big point of eutrophication and pollution. Clearing the area allows storms, storm surge, tsunamis, whatever, roll in and wreak havoc on the land. But this is how most of the shrimp comes from. This is how most of the world gets their seafood, because you may have the luxury of going to Publix and buying some sustainably caught Gulf shrimp, but billions of people in other countries don't. They get it any way they can. So we got that. That's a shrimp farm. This is mariculture, and again, most countries can't afford mariculture. We can in many areas. Mother Nature is getting rid of the wastes, bringing in the nutrients, and you don't have to go chase after the fish and waste energy that way. You can farm whatever you're doing right in these pens, but not efficient. Most of our fisheries are not sustainable. Most of them trawl, long line, or gill net. This is what a trawler looks like. This is like straight from Forrest Gump. And this is how it works. The nets go down, weighted on one side, float on the other, and they indiscriminately catch. Many of them scrape the bottom. So you're basically taking everything you can get with that trawl net. Long lining, indiscriminate catching again. You are putting chunks of bait, you roll it out. It sits for a given amount of time, and then you roll it back in and you take what you get. And gill netting is you put out your nets in known migration territories and catch the fish as they swim. Another indiscriminate killer. So really, our fisheries are not sustainable. Our fisheries are not sustainable. Recovering, only 3% of our fish stocks are recovering. This is a great resource. I included the website because they updated. This is a little older picture, but this is updated, Monterey Bay Aquarium. if you are so inclined to choose sustainable alternatives to seafood, then this site is constantly updated for regions. It has regions, and you get your best good alternatives and don't eats. There is a East Coast of the United States region. There is all the different regions that if you were to travel, you could find out sustainably which ones are the best choices. Earlier in this program, I mentioned whaling. And yes, we did hunt most whales, most of the big whales, the great whales. There's two types. We have the toothed whales, and there's one toothed whale that is considered a great whale, and that is the sperm whale. Here's sperm whales here and here in this image. And then the baleen whales. Whales where many species were driven to near extinction. Here's a minke that was harpooned, brought up, processed for food, oils, and other products, ivory, so on. You can see whaling has gone down a great deal since its heyday in the 1950s and 60s. This is due to international agreement, but there are places in violation of that, and you can't do much. So some real life case studies. One that I lived through was the big tuna gate. I guess everything's a gate since Watergate, but tuna gate. It was found out that most tuna contained dolphin in it because tunas were gill netted, and dolphins and tunas have similar prey. So spotter planes would spot pods of dolphins. The dolphins would then be herded toward gill nets, and the tuna would be herded toward gill nets as well. And then boom, you kill a lot of dolphins, but you catch a lot of tuna. When that got out, people were up in arms because they love dolphins, and the boycott was actually effective. It's one of the only times a boycott has worked because people actually stuck to it. And now we have this dolphin safe tuna stamp, and it certifies that the tuna were caught in sustainable methods. So the dolphins were not injured. Shark finning, because it is considered a delicacy, has really, put many of our shark species in danger. Coral reefs and coral bleaching. We've talked about that with the impending climate disaster and its effect on coral. This is a cool program. Any of you can do it. Become a certified diver, go down, and there's a place in the Florida Keys where you can sign up and help replant coral. It's not really plants because they're animals, but what they do is they're growing coral and then they're locating it in areas where the coral has been damaged or destroyed. So these are just three, and there's many more cases of environmental damage that is being caused. Well, folks, that concludes today's lesson. Please remember that you do have current events and a quiz. Yep, you see, thank you. Thank you very much for posting that. That's definitely through the Monterey Aquarium, am I right? Yeah, you're nodding, good job. Thank you for doing that. You're on the spot for me. It's been a good time interacting, talking with some of you after class and before class. I've had a pleasure working with you. I know it's not quite goodbye because we do have a review, but have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy. Don't get lazy on me though. I'm pointing my finger. Don't get lazy on me because you do have a lot to do, but you have time to do it. So if there's not any questions, are there any questions? See you next week. Well, the week after for the wrap up. And thank you. You're not getting lazy on me and you're laughing. I appreciate that. I will see you all Monday after Thanksgiving for the best darn review session you've ever seen. And have a great holiday.
Are you going to pre-publish the last quiz? Not the final,
It's on
but the
my
last
to-do
quiz.
list, so I hope so.
Okay, but you don't have a date yet.
Well, I don't because I haven't sat down and done it yet.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice holiday.
You too. You too. Have a
Great
great day,
Thanksgiving.
everybody.